Welcome back to Wall Again, where passion meets music. And in this episode, I'm going to be rating my top 10 bands from Ireland. Well, when I say bands, it can be musical artists, it can be solo artists as well, but it's basically musical acts from the whole island of Ireland. So let's kick straight into this. Coming in at number 10, Sinead O'Connor. Absolutely brilliant. What an absolute legend this lady was. So she was born in a town to the south of Dublin called Dunleary, sometimes pronounced Dunleera. And she went on to have a massive career. She was very outspoken. She didn't fit the mainstream trends. She often shaved her head. She spoke out against the Catholic Church, and rightly so. She was a trailblazer, but she had the most beautiful voice, absolutely soulful voice. She came to prominence really in America in the 1990s, the early 1990s, with a cover of a Prince song called Nothing Compares to You, and it was absolutely amazing. But she has a lot more than just that going on. She had some earlier albums which were really, really great, kind of on the indie or the alternative rock kind of genre. But yeah, Sinead O'Connor was a huge, huge star all around the world, and definitely deserves to be on this list, without a doubt. Okay, coming in at number 9, it is the Cranberries. Another Irish lady who was a phenomenon around the world. Absolutely brilliant. Dolores O'Riordan, of course, is the person I'm talking about. She led the Cranberries. They were her band. They came from Limerick, and they were absolutely sensational. They had a number of albums in the early to mid 1990s that were absolutely huge, with songs like Linger and Zombie, of course, which was a worldwide hit for the band. They really took influence from different styles of music. So obviously, being Irish, they had that the Celtic, Gaelic influence, which were so synonymous with in this island. But she also had the rock influence. So I think bands like, maybe Nirvana, Pearl Jam, stuff like that, stuff that was going on in America at the time, really influenced the Cranberries. Their songs were like heavy rock, but there was a lot of ballads, there was a lot of Irish kind of songs in there as well. So absolutely fantastic band, and the way they were able to blend all those styles together just really does it for me. Cranberries are in at number 9. Coming in at number 8, a band I was lucky enough to see just a couple of months ago. It's a band from the north. They're called Therapy. Absolutely brilliant. They were always considered Ireland's answer to heavy metal. They came out in the 1990s, I think it was the early 90s, and they supported people like Metallica. I think they may have even supported Nirvana, but they were heavily influenced by the whole grunge and alternative rock scene in America at the time. Again, similar to Cranberries, but this band had absolutely zero Celtic rock going on. They were a band that, to be honest, sounded like they could have been from the States, from Seattle or somewhere. They had a heavy alternative rock sound going on, fused with elements of metal, and an absolutely brilliant band. Of course, their big hit, Trouble Gum, that album was absolutely huge for them. I think it was released in 1994, and they definitely deserve to be on my list. Okay, coming in at number 7. This is a band that Pat from Close to the Edge raved about on his channel not so long ago. It is a band called the Horslips. Okay, fantastic Irish band. Now, this band brought in loads of that Celtic influence into their songs. As well as that, they also played a lot of hard rock. So, bluesy guitars, great drums, great vocals, all of that was there as well. And they also had elements of prog. As Pat will say, he considers them a Celtic prog band. And I have to agree with that fully. Horslips were absolutely brilliant. But their guitar work was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. What an amazing band. And definitely deserving of a place on my list. Okay, coming in at number 6 is probably going to be a surprise for a lot of people. It's a guitarist from Belfast called Vivian Campbell. Now, if the name doesn't ring a bell straight off the bat, please bear with me. So Vivian Campbell started playing guitar in the late 1970s. He ended up joining a band called Sweet Savage, who had a hit called Killing Time. Now, that song was actually recorded by Metallica many years later on their Garage Inc. CD. But that band, however, didn't stick around, and Vivian ended up going and joining no other than Ronnie James Dio, the godfather of metal. Okay, the guy who invented this symbol. So He went on and he joined Dio. He played, of course, on that album Holy Diver, and the song Holy Diver, which is a phenomenal heavy metal track, very influential. Falling out with Ronnie James Dio, he hooked up with David Coverdale and Whitesnake. He was only with them for a very short period of time. I think it was less than a year. But within that year, he managed to record the guitar solo on a song called Give Me All Your Love, and it was the radio edit. And he also appeared in a lot of the videos for Here I Go Again, Is This Love, and in The Still of the Night. Loads of photo shoots with the band. So a very prominent member of the band after John Sykes had left, and when Whitesnake were going through the hair metal, start of the hair metal phase, should we call it. But shortly after that, he fell out with David Coverdale, and he joined Def Leppard in the early 1990s, replacing, of course, the legendary Steve Clark. And he's been with Def Leppard ever since. He's contributed songwriting and guitar parts to all their albums since 1992, and he's also appeared on videos for them. He plays the Steve Clark parts live. I've seen him live many times with Def Leppard, but I've also seen him with Thin Lizzy. He filled in with Thin Lizzy for a couple of years there around 2010, 2011 on guitar alongside Scott Gorham. Very capable guitarist, absolutely brilliant. He's definitely got the chops, and with all the bands he's played in, it's no surprise where he is on this list. But if you're not a big guitar player or a big hard rock or heavy metal fan, it's very possible that you may not know who Vivian Campbell is, but now you do know, and now you know why he's on my list. Okay, before I dive into the top 5, I just want to say who's actually excluded from this list. So there's going to be a lot of bands out there, Irish bands, who are very popular, great bands, but they haven't made it on my list because I love my rock music, I love my metal, so they are the artists I'm really looking out for. I'm not as concerned with, other sorts of music. So I'll give you some examples. In Ireland, we have traditional Irish folk music, okay? It's absolutely huge. It's by far the most popular form of music in Ireland. And to be honest, it never resonated with me. And I call it diddly eye music, okay? So some of the bands I've excluded from my list because these bands fit into that genre are the Pogues, the Chieftains, the Dubliners, Christy Moore, the Wolf Tones, Clonard, Enya, and Paul Brady. I also don't like pop music, okay? Unless it's really, really good pop music that's well produced. Generally, and I'm just looking out for the production there. It's not the songwriting I'm looking for, and certainly wouldn't be the guitar playing and pop music that I'm looking out for. So, for me, the artists that I've excluded, these are Irish artists that are big pop acts all over the world. We've got Dermot Kennedy, Hosier, Codaline, Picture This, The Corrs, Bell X1, Damien Rice, Damien Dempsey, Paddy Casey, and of course The Script. Okay, I've also left out some of the new rock bands that are on the circuit at the moment in Ireland. So you may or may not be aware, but there's a lot of rock bands on the circuit in Ireland at the moment. Some of them are quite good, but the reason I've left them off my list is because they haven't come of age yet. Okay, they still have to prove themselves, as it were. So I'm talking about bands like Crow Black Chicken, Fontaine's DC, who are on the rise, and I've no doubt at some point they will be included on this list if they keep going the way they're going. The Murder Capital, who I saw last year I saw them supporting Pearl Jam. So they impressed me. They were pretty good, so they deserve to be on the list. And I've also included Indigo Lights and Savage Hearts. So people will know why I'm including those two bands if you watch my channel. Okay, so let's dive into the top 5. So coming in at number 5 from County Tyrone, it is the guitar legend himself, Pat McManus. What an absolute genius. Brilliant. He started out with his two brothers in a band called the Mama's Boys in the 1980s. They got their major label deal. They released an album called Plug It In, which is absolutely fantastic. It mixes Celtic rock with hard rock. And then he went out on his own and had his own solo career. Very successful. There's a live album that he has out there. It's called Pat McManus Live and In Time, and it's absolutely phenomenal. If you get a chance to listen to it, I would strongly advise you to do that. I was lucky enough to see him play very locally here in Drogheda in McHugh's last year. I ended up winning a ticket from the lads from That Sound podcast. Thanks to Luke and Gavin for that. And that was the first time I'd ever seen Pat McManus live, and I was blown away by him. Absolutely phenomenal guitar player and a great, great Irish musician. Definitely deserves his place at number 5 on my list. Okay, coming in at number 4. Everybody knows that this band was going to be somewhere on the list. Some people think that this band should be at number one or way up there. Some people think they shouldn't be on the list at all. But I have to say, I am a fan of U2. Okay, I really, really like them. Seen them many, many times. First time I ever saw them was at Slane in 2001. A very, very special gig. Absolutely brilliant. U2 Go Home. But for me, when I listen back to U2's back catalogue, obviously they started as like a new wave punk kind of band. And then they really evolved their sound to become a lot more radio friendly. And it was albums like the Unforgettable Fire and particularly the Joshua Tree that I think resonated with me the most. Now I was very young when those albums were released, but they were always like those albums, or the songs from those albums were always on at home when I was growing up, whether it be on the radio or whatever. And yeah, I think they're just very, very important albums in rock and pop history. Even though they're Irish, they managed to have this massive global phenomenon and this global pull that people everywhere in the world know U2, in every single country. Particularly in America, they're massive in the United States, and it's as a result of great songwriting, great production, and a great vision, I have to say. They moved on then after Joshua Tree, and then they completely changed. They went away from that kind of rock thing into a more indie alternative kind of thing. So they released an album in the early 1990s, I think it was 1991, called Achtung Baby. Absolutely brilliant album, probably one of their best, up there with the Joshua Tree. And then they went into a whole kind of pop dance, Euro kind of dance thing, which I really didn't get. So there was albums like Pop and Zooropa, wasn't really into them. And then in the year 2000, I believe it was, they released All That You Can't Leave Behind, and that was brilliant, followed by How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb. Two good rock albums in a time when people like Bon Jovi were having a resurgence as well. So guitar and rock music was starting to become popular again. And then they kind of fell off the map. The last 3 or 4 albums haven't been great from U2. But being an Irish band and having such an impact globally is absolutely brilliant. Like, you cannot deny what they have achieved in their career. Okay, so before we get into my top 3, I'm just going to go through some honourable mentions, because there's a lot of bands I could have included in this list and they didn't make the cut. They just didn't make the top 10, and there's various reasons for that, but at the moment these are the bands that are just outside my top 10. So we have Van Morrison, and particularly his early stuff with the band Them, and also the stuff from like Astral Weeks and all that good stuff. I really like his early stuff. I have Glenn Hansard and the Frames. He just missed out. He's not included on this list. We have, of course, Dublin band Aslan. Again, another brilliant band. Just missed out on the list here. We have another band from the north, Snow Patrol. Not including them on the list. We've got Imelda May, a fantastic jazz singer from Dublin. But again, just misses out on my top 10. Another band from the north, Ash, who are kind of like... I don't know what you call them, a punk band or an alternative rock band, but they've been going strong for a long, long time now, and still gigging and still playing festivals. Absolutely brilliant. Another band from the north called The Answer. Now, these guys are a blues rock band. They kind of sound a bit like Led Zeppelin. Fantastic singer in Cormac Neeson. Absolutely brilliant, but they miss out on my top 10. Also have The Undertones, the band that, of course, famously wrote and recorded Teenage Kicks. One of the greatest pop songs of all time, according to John Peel. Yeah, that's all my honourable mentions. So now we're into the real serious stuff here of the top 3. So coming in at number 3, it has to be one of the best guitar players of all time, Gary Moore. Originally from Belfast, moved down to Dublin, joined a band called Skid Row with Bruce Shields. Were absolutely brilliant band. They were up there with Cream in terms of a power trio. Shortly after that then, he teamed up with Thin Lizzy in 1974 and recorded one song, Still in Love With You. He records the guitars on that one. And then Thin Lizzy wanted to go with 2 guitar players. So Gary moved on. Throughout the 1970s, he had many different projects. And then at the end of the 70s, he teamed up again with Phil to join Thin Lizzy and release the fantastic Black Rose album, otherwise known as Roisin Dove. A fantastic album. I've mentioned this album on the channel before, and I will do a review of it at some point. Gary moves on then. It didn't stop him recording some singles with Phil. He recorded a single called Parisian Walkways, which is of course one of the most famous songs of that whole era. And he also recorded a song called Out in the Fields in the early 1980s with Phil. He also had some of his own projects going on, Back on the Streets, and another fantastic album called Still Got the Blues. This is when Gary Moore really showed the world what a fantastic blues rock guitar player he was. But he wasn't just that, he was also a fantastic jazz fusion musician. He played in a jazz fusion band called Coliseum 2, and then he had a stellar solo career all the way through the 80s. He started getting into the metal scene a little bit more in the late 1980s. One of his best songs, which is one of the best blues rock songs of all time, Still Got the Blues. Go have a listen to that song if you've never heard it before. His guitar playing is fantastic, and I'd advise you to listen to the live version of it, because the live version is so much better than the studio version. Okay, we're coming into the top 2 now. And coming in at number 2 should really be no surprise for anyone on this channel, or maybe it will be. It is of course Boyzone. One of the most successful bands ever to come out of Ireland. Absolutely brilliant. 5 fantastic singers. You know, you've got Ronan, you've got Stephen, you've got Mikey, and then there are 2 other blokes. They were great dancers, they were great singers, they were great at covering other people's songs. Absolutely brilliant. What more do you want from a boy band? Moving on now to number 1. There's only one band that could come in at number 1, and that is of course Westlife. One of the most successful bands that Ireland ever produced. Hit after hit after hit. Again, they started off as a 5-piece just like Boyzone. They had loads of number 1s, they covered ABBA's songs. Westlife have to be the number 1 band ever to come out of Ireland. And if you believe that, you obviously don't follow my channel. This is a rock and roll channel, heavy metal channel, hard rock, prog rock. How would I ever have Boyzone and Westlife at number 2 and number 1? Boyzone and Westlife are 2 of the worst things to ever come out of Ireland, okay? They're terrible. I hate everything about them. The fact that they're manufactured, the fact that they cover other people's music, the fact that only 1 or 2 of them can sing of the 5 and the rest of them just dance. It's nonsense. I think they're terrible. But my real band at number 2 has to be Thin Lizzy. What a band. What an absolute brilliant, brilliant rock band. Unbelievable. All over the world, this band are renowned as one of the best hard rock bands of all time. A fantastically stellar catalogue from the early 1970s or late 1960s, the whole way up to their last album, Thunder and Lightning, in 1983. Unbelievable. A plethora of brilliant, legendary guitar players playing alongside the frontman Phil Lynott and drummer Brian Downey. They had, of course, Eric Bell, Thin Lizzy Mark 1, 3 fantastic albums, Shades of Blue Orphanage, Thin Lizzy, Vagabonds of the Western World. Then we come in with the dual guitar partnership of Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson. Absolutely brilliant. We've got Fighting, we've got Jailbreak, we've got Nightlife, we've got Johnny the Fox, we've got Bad Reputation. Then there's a bit of a change up there. Brian Robertson leaves the band. In comes Gary Moore. Spoke about Gary. Absolutely fantastic. The Black Rose album. Roisin Dove. Unbelievable. 1979. Gary leaves. In comes Snowy White. Another 2 knockout albums. Chinatown and Renegades. Snowy leaves. John Sykes comes in. And they also bring in Darren Wharton on keyboards. And they release Thunder and Lightning, which is arguably one of the best heavy metal albums ever recorded. Absolutely brilliant. It's definitely metal. They changed from hard rock to metal. So they start off with kind of folk, prog, then they go into like hard rock, and then they're moving on to heavy metal by the end. But what an unbelievable band. Phil was a legend. He was one of the best. This band are now huge in the States. They're huge in the UK. They're huge in Europe. Of course, they're huge in Ireland. We all love them here. Ireland has about, I'm not exaggerating now, I think Ireland has about 10 Thin Lizzy tribute acts or cover bands doing the rounds here. And if you're playing in a Thin Lizzy tribute band in Ireland, you need to be 10 out of 10 because the crowd will let you know if you're not good enough. Just to say about Thin Lizzy as well, they weren't afraid to bring in the Celtic elements, particularly with the vocals, with Phil talking about Cuchulainn and all these mythological figures from Irish history. You know, Phil was a poet. He was one of the best lyric writers of all time. John Bon Jovi, Bruce Springsteen, James Hetfield, of course, of Metallica. They all look up to Phil Lynott. So there you are, Thin Lizzy coming in at number 2. So who's the real number 1? Well, it has to be Rory Gallagher, the original Irish rock star. He was doing it before Thin Lizzy were doing it. He was doing it on his own terms. He was a virtuoso musician, a very gifted guitar player, a fantastic songwriter, a brilliant performer, and apparently a really, really down to earth, nice, genuine man. He was all about the music. He did everything he possibly could to not be famous. All he wanted to do was gig and play guitar. That was it. He had no interest in trying to appeal to a mainstream audience. He had no interest in recording hits and being on top of the pops. That was not his game. He was in it purely for the music. And you can hear that when you listen to Rory Gallagher live, or if you watch any of his DVDs or listen to any of his albums, you know that he's just doing it for the music. He wasn't into all this polished, overproduced work that people do in the studio. He just wanted to get in, record the albums, get the ideas down, lay them down and get out and tour. And he loved touring, particularly in Europe and Ireland. He absolutely loved touring. Before he had his Rory Gallagher band, of course, he was in a band called The Taste, and they were phenomenal. They were as good as Cream, in my opinion. Absolutely brilliant as a power trio. But where he really, really shone was in the Rory Gallagher band, of course, where he could follow his own artistic direction. The guys in the band were more than happy to follow him. So definitely, in my opinion, Rory Gallagher, the best musical artist ever to come from Ireland. Okay, I hope you enjoyed my video. If you disagree with anything I said, please put it down in the comments. We would love to hear from you. And maybe there's some bands that I haven't mentioned. I think I've mentioned everyone. I've given someone an honourable mention or a dishonourable mention in the case of Boyzone and Westlife. But yeah, let me know in the comments what your top 10 artists from Ireland are. If you could also like, subscribe, and I will talk to you on the next one. Bye for now.